My name is Kelly Six, and I've been here at this event for a few years, so some of you have probably met me in past years. I own my own consulting firm, Six CPA Services, and I have 4 nonprofit CPAs next to me here who will be participating in the discussion. So first, what I'd like to do is let everyone introduce themselves. So we can start down on the far end.
Good morning. My name is Jane Wokus, and I'm with the Milwaukee Art Museum. I am the Chief Operating and Financial Officer there, and I've been there almost 9 years.
Good morning, I'm Angela Thomas with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. I'm the General Accounting Section Chief overseeing accounts payables.
Good morning, I'm Dorothy Condor. I am with Madison College. I've been there for about 2.5 years as the Assistant Controller.
Hi, I'm Gail Borma. I am with the Lutheran Home Harwood Place and their supporting foundation in Wauwatosa. I'm the VP of Finance and CFO. I've been there since January of this year, but I've got several years experience in healthcare, predominantly in the continuing care retirement arena, but I've got some hospital background too, having been with the Freighter system for a few years.
Thank you, and welcome. So I have a list of questions that were submitted by participants ahead of time, and if we have time at the end and you have more questions, we can certainly ask those as well. But I'll just start by asking all of you. I've got 3 questions at the beginning that I'd like each one of you to ask, and then we'll kind of target 1 or 2 people for each of the remaining questions. So starting with Gail, and we'll just work our way down the table. Can you just go into the main responsibilities in your current role and just talk about the general size of your entity's total budget?
Okay. So my current role, in a nutshell, is to safeguard the assets of the organizations. So whatever it takes to do that, that's what I do. I also provide leadership, development, and mentoring to the accounting teams. And I have never been in public accounting. I've always been in the business arena. So I really know workflow. I really know it. I worked for someone who had been a KPMG auditor and really learned a lot about internal controls from her. And so I'm responsible for that, to make sure that we do have the segregation of duties and everything that needs to be in place that we need to have. And I also oversee the compliance with government regulations. So we're heavily regulated. Besides the nuclear industry, the long-term care, skilled nursing, assisted living, we're heavily regulated. And we have a lot of government reporting that we have to do. I oversee the creation of policies and procedures, and I'm also responsible for relationship development with our bankers, our investment people, the auditors, others like that. And then I'm also a contributing leader of the executive team. So I participate in the strategic planning for the organization, and then also do the financial strategy. We have a total budget of about $30 million.
Thank you, Gail. You know, I think it's really important, some of the things that you mentioned, and we'll probably hear from some of the other panelists, but being a part of the executive team, that's something that sometimes the students might not realize, that you're part of that executive team of the organization, as well as maintaining all those external relationships with bankers and things. So that's something that I learned when I was in nonprofit, but again, something you might not think about. So there's outside of the accounting duties that you have. So. Dorothy?
Okay. Madison College has a budget of about $300 million. Most of you are probably familiar with technical colleges and how we function. We are funded mainly by the state and federal government. Tuition is a very small portion of what actually funds us. My area of responsibilities includes cash management, which means making sure that we have adequate cash on hand to meet our needs, as well as managing investments. I also oversee accounts payable and fixed assets accounting, and of course the safeguard of our assets as well from that perspective. Oversee the general ledger and the daily functioning of just making sure that our record keeping meets the appropriate regulations. Also, that include the financial statements preparation, including the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report that we have to pull together at the end of each year. I do manage the audits, both internal and external. We actually do have an internal audit function at the college. And like I said, our budget is about $300 million. And we do have to file a lot of compliance reports with the WTCS, which is the Wisconsin Technical College System. And that board or organization oversees all the 16 technical colleges across the state. And so we have a lot of compliance obligations to them, as well as to the federal government for student financial aid purposes as well. So those are my main areas of responsibilities. And with that, I have about 6 people that report into my area.
Thank you.
And I'm Angela Thomas again from the Department of Natural Resources. We have a budget at the DNR of about $550 million. So I oversee one section because it is such a large section, our accounts payable area. Some of the things I'm charged with most recently, we had a systems implementation of a new financial software late last year. So we're working on developing and documenting processes to make sure that we're meeting our internal controls and our best practices. The practice has had to change with the change in technology, which I'm sure no matter where you work, you probably have experienced something similar. And it can be really challenging across a large organization or agency when the process has to change. A lot of what I'm doing lately is hiring staff and managing their workload. With such a large volume coming through our area, it's imperative that things are processed accurately using the best practice. We are responsible to maintain vendor relationships, and we are working with people not only throughout the state, but throughout the country from the DNR. Our main area of interest, of course, is Wisconsin, with keeping our environment safe and protected, and our water and our air, and there's a lot of different divisions within the DNR. But in the section that I'm overseeing, I hire students that are right out of high school, also some out of college. So it's a good entry level, good experience to be gained working in our payables section. I'm also reviewing the policies and procedures from the DNR, again, needing some updating with some changes. I am active with our Public Policy Committee here in Madison and have participated in talking and bringing some students to different activities to share the process. We are mainly funded, of course, state and federal dollars. There's a lot of donations that are made to the DNR, so special reporting requirements are necessary when we're paying out funds that are only allowed to be used in a certain fashion. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jane Wokus again, and I'm at the Milwaukee Art Museum. I have responsibility for finance, and in addition to that, I have facilities, security, the museum store, and food and beverage. So I also am a member of the senior management team at the museum, and we have a number of committees that I also need to report to in addition to the board. We have an executive committee, an audit committee, an investment committee, and a facilities committee. And currently, we have a working group as well. We are in the process of trying to acquire O'Donnell Park from the county. So I'm involved in those negotiations and financial forecasts, due diligence, etc. So sometimes I have to wear many hats. We just hired a new director at the museum, so I was also involved in the selection of the director and in the transition process. So a lot of things in addition to just normal accounting policies and procedures. And our budget is about, I'm not sure if I mentioned, it's about 16 million.
Thank you. So as you can see, depending on the size of the organization, the role at a nonprofit could be kind of all-encompassing, or it can be, down to just one small area of the overall budget. And I think that's one thing that people don't always understand. When you mention nonprofit, different things come to mind. So I think we have a really great group here that can really tell you about all the different areas and all the different types of nonprofits there are to work in. So moving on, we'll start over here again, Gail. Do you want to just mention how you got involved in nonprofits and if you had an interest in the nonprofit world before becoming a CPA?
I had not actually considered not-for-profit. I was working in a for-profit industry, and I was going to school at the same time, so I'm a non-traditional student. I went back to school and finished my degree, achieved my CPA while I was working in a pharmacy as a bookkeeper, and then I answered an ad in the newspaper for a financial director at a life care community. So it was my first venture into the retirement industry, and it was life care means you take in an entrance fee, and the residents who live there for the rest of their life continue to pay their same apartment fee even if they go into assisted living or into the nursing home, and the entrance fees are used then to help pay for the differences. So I had never, I got the interview, I ended up getting the job. The night before my interview, a FedEx package was on my front doorstep. It had their financial statements in it, and it said, "Be prepared to make a financial presentation in the interview tomorrow." And they had their audit partner there too. It's like, holy smokes, do I want to work for an organization that's going to do this to me? So, and then they had a team of 12 people, their leadership team too, that all came in at the same time to interview me. So I got the job, but it was very, very stressful. And that was my first venture into it. Absolutely loved it. Ended up leaving the city that we were living in and came to the Milwaukee area, and through networking with the audit partner, manager that I had at that last facility, I got a lead on a job in the Frederick Community Memorial Health System in the Milwaukee area, and went on board as their manager of general accounting. So I've been in not-for-profit ever since then. I've never gone back to the for-profit. So it was not intentional, but not originally, but I wouldn't go back to for-profit at this point.
Thank you. Dorothy?
Actually, I didn't necessarily have an interest in not-for-profit. I started in public accounting, but that's the beauty of accounting as a career. You have so many different paths that you could take. I've been in public accounting. That's where I started my career. From there, I went into corporate, where I spent more than 16 years working for American Girl, which is a division of Mattel. And then after 16 years, of course, I wanted to do something different. So I started looking around. The opportunity to join the college came up. So I said, why not try that? Because it is the same when it comes down to it. You know, accounting is the same across the board. I mean, there are specific regulations that you have to follow. You know, there are certain ways that you do things in different organizations, but it really is transferable to different, career paths, and that's how I ended up at the college. Of course, there's a lot to learn. You know, studying fund accounting is not the same as doing fund accounting, so that was something that obviously you had to, relearn, in how you practice, that area versus practicing in public accounting or even corporate. But again, that is, as you talk to your students, I think it's just a matter of, there's so many different paths, and the reason why I ended up in education is that, of course, education has always been important to me and my family, and so being part of something that is a little more than just a career that is, I guess, for-profit as opposed to non-profit, where the mission is different, different reasons that you could, appreciate in that environment, led me to seek that opportunity a little more when it came up. So that's how I ended up in the not-for-profit arena.
I think I was meant to end up in not-for-profit. I actually started volunteering as a teenager 22 years ago with the Civil Air Patrol. It's an Air Force auxiliary and 501c3 organization that works to benefit the community, state, and nation with aerospace education, the cadet program, so teaching younger people to be respectful, have teamwork, and develop leadership skills, and then also emergency services, which is being trained to go out and help people that are missing, or finding and locating downed aircraft, part of our aerospace education. So from an early age on, I was doing that. I'm excited to hear Gail's background because I, too, am a non-traditional CPA, coming up through pharmacy as a technician, a certified technician, working towards a biology degree, which I obtained from Madison. And then after a year, having reached the top of my career ladder, I needed something else. I knew I wanted more out of my career. I wanted to be challenged, and I wanted to help more people. So I really enjoyed healthcare, worked in healthcare, both on a retail and an inpatient and a surgical basis for a number of years. But I went back to school while having a family and other commitments. And I'm delighted to see Dorothy today because she was one of my professors when I went back to school. She hasn't aged a day. So then I worked towards transforming, my career from pharmacy to finance. And I was at the UW Hospital and Clinics in healthcare at that time. They made that transition pretty easy for me. They supported the change. There was a need at the organization for both pharmacy and finance. And after a couple years working for them and deciding I wanted to go back and work on the CPA exams, I looked for a position as an accountant. And that's where I ended up over at another state agency, the Department of Justice, for several years before coming over to my current role in general accounting. So I do have a very different background as well, and it's surprising to some that you tell them you have a biology degree, people might think you're in teaching or research, which I certainly could do any of those things, but the skill set to work in a field of science and finance is very similar. Analytical, problem solving, getting to work with people I like to do, and so I think I was maybe, in the back of my mind, if I didn't realize it at the time, meant to work in nonprofit. I really enjoy the mission of the different agencies I've worked at and the different organizations I volunteer with to really help a larger population.
Hi, I guess I'm more of the traditional student. I knew I wanted to be an accountant. I'm not sure why. But I knew that in high school, and I never changed. I went to Whitewater, and I graduated, went into public accounting. From there, I went into insurance, and then I went into manufacturing. And when I was, my last manufacturing company I worked for was owned by private equity. So we went through 2 acquisitions and 3 sales in 4 years. And it was just, that was your life. They'd say, okay, we want you in Cincinnati on Tuesday, and it didn't, you had no control over your life. And so I decided that wasn't for me. And there happened to be an ad in for the Milwaukee Art Museum for a controller. And I thought, they'll never get bought out. So that's sort of how I got into the not-for-profit world. But I'm really glad that I did. It sort of was a baptism by fire because the CFO at the time knew that she wanted to leave, in probably a few years, but it happened to be after 5 months, and then they put me into the CFO role. So it was a baptism by fire, but I'm very glad I did it. I've been exposed to more things than I have been in probably any other job because, we did a reinstallation and we renovated the gallery, so there was a big construction project. We negotiated with the county to get control of the building, and now we're in negotiation with the county and the War Memorial again for O'Donnell Park. We've gone through a director transition, so I've really been exposed to a number of different things that have been very challenging and rewarding. I would also say that working for a nonprofit, people are very passionate about the mission of the institution. They really enjoy being there, and they love the mission of the institution, and that really makes working with those individuals very rewarding as well.
Thank you. I think a common theme that we heard throughout everyone's responses is the mission of the nonprofit, and I noticed the same thing. There's a huge difference when you are working with people who are truly behind your mission and are excited to come to work and aren't just necessarily there just to do their job. So that's what I find rewarding about nonprofit work is just seeing everyone behind the same mission and doing something good with your debits and credits and accounting, or feeling like you are anyway. So, thank you. So the next question, and since many of you have been in both the for-profit and the nonprofit world, feel free to chime in. But I'm going to put this one to Angela. What are some of the differences and similarities between not-for-profit accounting and for-profit?
Sure. Well, I think, both types of organizations have to have enough revenue to meet their operating expenses. I mean, just at the end of the day. I think a big difference is stakeholders. Who is the stakeholder? Is it the shareholders looking for profit maximization in your for-profit entities? Or is it, the people of Wisconsin looking to, in my case, have clean water and clean air and make sure that businesses are following environmental protection policies. From a more detailed basis, cost allocation is an area that I've been exposed to in government, and I do think that applies in both entities, but it really helps identify in the nonprofit organization where you're putting your energies and your dollars and what is the activity costing the organization. I think to know if you're successful in the organization, you need to meet your obligations, but also generate enough revenue to reinvest in the nonprofit organization to keep the mission going forward. So the stakeholders in a nonprofit, while they might not contribute financially, I would echo what Jane said about the passion that they can contribute to the organization as far as keeping things moving forward. I would say both entities have limited resources, whether you're run by volunteers or by employees that are hired. Everybody is working to do more with less, especially in the most recent years and changes in our economy. And so I think that struggle is felt no matter what your business type or profit-driving resource is. So, thank you.
Thank you. So does anyone else have anything to add to that? Otherwise, we can move on.
The other thing I'll add is that you still have a customer base. It may be a different kind of customer. In that case, you have our students, or you have your taxpayers, or the citizens. So you still have to meet your customers' needs in the way that is obviously expected. And the regulations may keep us in line, but at the end of the day, we also have to answer to our customers, just like the for-profits would.
That's a really great point.
One difference, too, in the area that I'm in is that, we have no owners. We're run by a volunteer board of directors. So in the not-for-profit arena, even the board of directors cannot be compensated for the time that they spend. So.
Great point. All right, so Gail, I'm going to direct the next question towards you. In high school, students are taught about profit. So in a nonprofit, that's not quite as important, but what's a good way of measuring success in a nonprofit?
Well, first of all, we do make a profit. We don't call it a profit. It's actually our revenue over our expenses. So that's one of the differences, and it all gets reinvested back into the organization to continue the good work that we do, the programs and the services that we provide. So we benchmark our performance to our budget. We've got goals and we've got budgets, so we measure to those. We also do trend analysis year over year to see how we're doing, comparing ratios and actual revenue and expenses. And then we benchmark to our industry. So we benchmark to the financial performance and also our employee retention. So that's very important in the industry that I'm in, because we really want that continuity of care and services for our residents and clients. And then we also utilize surveys for the residents, employees, and also our clients.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment on the profit measurement in a nonprofit?
Again, I'll go back to our students, and for us, it's student outcomes, graduation rates, retention, employer satisfaction, all of those are expected to be at the level that we need it to be in order for our corporations and our citizens to function. And so while we may not have profit measurements per se, we still have measurements that measure the results of how we're doing as a college.
And I would like to add that there are also, when you apply for grants or you have corporations that sponsor certain programs that you do, you need to report back to them on the results of that program. For example, Kohl's has been a major sponsor for us for education. So they want to know how many families have you touched, how many, has your family membership grown as a result of that, what children have you reached out to, et cetera. And, school programs, corporations are always looking at how many school tours do you do, what percentage of that are MPS students, and there's certain measurements that you do in addition to having a balanced budget. Our board has always been very adamant about having a balanced budget. But again, whether you have if you do have a surplus, you invest it back into an operating reserve that then you can save for a rainy day.
And I would just echo that in government, probably the most key thing to our stakeholders and our customers is staying within the budget. It's all public record. We spend a lot of money in a lot of different areas, and we want to be sure that we're doing that the most efficient way and staying within the amount of funds that have been allocated for these purposes.
Exactly. Thank you. So Dorothy, could you touch a little bit on the cash flows in a nonprofit?
I think the main differences between nonprofit and for-profit is the timing and the source of the funds. For us, there are times where you get the cash flow, you get your state aid at a certain times of the year, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, and so then you're having to manage that over a longer period of time to make sure that you are adequately either investing in a certain horizon to make sure the funds become available when it's needed. And whereas for profit, obviously you have customer base, you're selling on a regular basis, you're getting cash flow in. There may be some that have seasonal cash flows, but I think it's particularly apparent in a not-for-profit environment like ours. State and federal funds obviously are for specific purposes, and so you really have to stay within those purposes, just like you just mentioned here today. And you have to make sure you are reporting and complying to those purposes. And you can't say, I'm going to take this and use it for here because I don't have the adequate funds in a program that the organization may want to do. I think the restrictions and the regulations is very apparent in a not-for-profit environment when it comes to the cash flow. The tax levy component of ours, for example, you really have to stay within the boundaries of what is set by the taxpayers. So and the board may have the authority to levy tax, but they still have some restrictions as far as how much and how often you can do that. So I think the cash flow and the timing and the sources are the main differences when it comes to not-for-profit funding.
Thank you. Any other comments on cash flows?
Well, in the industry that I'm in, the cash flow is, well, cash is king. What we bill, we don't necessarily get paid for. So about, I would say 75% of our business is with CMS, which is the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. So we bill at our private rate, hypothetically, $365 a day in skilled nursing. And we get $165 a day from Medicaid, plus we're also responsible for all expenses associated with that resident. So we have to be very diligent about managing not only once we bill them, but that we work those claims, is what it's called in our industry, to make sure that we do get paid, because we don't get paid 100%. A lot of times it is 50%. Sometimes with Medicare, depending on the services that are provided. We can get more than that in one day, but again, we're responsible for all the expenses associated with those residents and clients. So if they need a pharmacy, that's our cost. If they need x-rays, an ambulance ride to the hospital, they have to go to a clinic for services, we're responsible for all that. So we're constantly monitoring and working to make sure that everything that we have coming to us because of the service we've provided, we will be getting that. One of the financial measures, it's not really a financial measure, but it is, because it ties with the cash flow, is that with the Affordable Care Act and the bundled payments, I don't know if you've heard about all of this, but we have to measure our outcomes. So how fast can we get somebody who comes in with a hip or a knee replacement? How fast can we get them rehabbed and get them home? And you know, how many rehospitalizations do we have? Because that hits us in the pocketbook as well. So as the Centers for Medicare or Medicaid start paying the hospitals and the hospitals start identifying who they're going to be doing business with, we need to make sure that, you know, that we're one of their choices. So, you know, it's really important that we really heighten the level of the scrutiny that we're putting on our cash.
Thank you. So we've mentioned throughout our discussions here about volunteers in nonprofits. The board of directors is volunteer, and depending on the nature of the entity, there could be volunteers in different areas. So Jane, can you touch a little bit on volunteers and how, what kind of safeguards you have to have in place when you do have volunteers?
Sure. We have actually over 300 volunteers at the museum. There's a core group of docents that help with tours for adults and school children, and then we also have other volunteers that volunteer in other areas. And we have everybody go through a background check, both from a staff standpoint and a volunteer standpoint, because of the art and the value of the art. We also don't have volunteers handle any cash. They're never involved in any cash transactions. So those are strictly employees. Those are probably the two big pinpoints that we use with our volunteers.
Thank you. All right, so now I'm looking for a little bit of advice. What can these teachers take back to their students to tell them about nonprofits? So if we want to just, again, start with Gail and maybe move down the line, some advice.
Okay. Why I am in a nonprofit is it's because of the heart. It's because of the mission. It's because the numbers are black and white, and you can get very cynical and very focused on nothing but black and white numbers all day long if you're in an office and you never really get engaged in the operations of what you're actually providing. So it's, you know, it's rewarding every single day. Again, we're a kind of a niche area because our customers live where we work. And they don't rotate out. I mean, there's a lot of differences even between the way that we do our accounting and the way that everyone else does their accounting. But it's so rewarding. You get job satisfaction like you would not get if you were like just isolated in an accounting office, that you never get to interact with the residents and with your clients. So it's, you know, it's just, it's the mission, it's the job satisfaction.
Thank you.
All right. To echo on that point, I think it's about the mission. If students can find what they're passionate about, they can combine it with the accounting as a career. I think, you know, what that's saying is if you find what you like, you never work a day in your life. And it really is true when it comes to the not-for-profit and the mission-driven organization that it is. Whether it's education, whether it's environmental causes, as long as students are passionate about something, they can always find a career in accounting that will go with it. And I think it's a matter of them finding what they love to do and making sure that they want a job that's not just about paying the bills, but something that they want to be able to get up every morning and go to because they love it. They love to do it. So that's what I'll add to that.
The message I would be sure to tell the students is whatever you do, do your best at it. Look at your challenges as opportunities for growth. Don't turn down a challenge. You can really build yourself as a person. You might discover that you have skills in an area that you didn't think you did. Back in my pharmacy days, I was encouraged to write an article about the work I was doing in drug shortages, the management of drug shortages. At that point, with my career experience and education and training, I did not see myself being published in a pharmacy journal, but that's what happened because I had the right mentorship and guidance and support to do that type of thing. I think, telling your students to find a mentor. Don't be afraid to ask somebody in a career field, can you tell me about your work? What do you do? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? You have that relationship established, and you can really make that connection and help them find a path. It's great if you can find that path right out of high school, but a lot of us don't. And I'm really glad I found the path I did. The variety of work is incredible. Working in nonprofit, you really can, echoing the same, you can engage your head in the accounting part and your heart with the mission. And I think that that's really key. There's plenty of jobs in the nonprofit world. Most of us, for-profit or not-for-profit, get to wear many hats. And so that really can be a great thing to understand from a high level how the business functions, and then do your part in your area to make sure you can continue the mission.
I guess I would just echo, I think the mission, if you love what you do, like Dorothy said, it doesn't seem like work. Everyone is very passionate and they love their job. I think that a misconception I believe that's out there is that if you're in a not-for-profit, you don't have to work as hard, or there's not as much to do. And I would almost say the opposite. I think nonprofits probably run leaner than a for-profit company, so you are forced to wear many hats. I think there are things that apply both in the for-profit world as well as the not-for-profit world. I have inventory control issues, cash issues, cash control as well as cash flow issues. So there's a lot of similarities, but I think the mission piece is what makes it just it gives you a deeper sense of what you can contribute. You feel like you're contributing to society more than perhaps in the for-profit world.
That you really can make a difference in people's lives, I think. I think that's what really motivates and drives me. And I think the wearing the different hats, I look on that as an opportunity too, because one day I'm working with the insurance brokers on, our risk exposure, and yesterday I'm teaching my staff how to do a basic reconciliation. So it's like, and I've dabbled in education, setting up an education department at one place that I worked, and growing technology from two computers two file servers sitting on a pallet in the accounting office to a multi-million-dollar data center with the right fire suppression, temperature controlled, staffed that internally with qualified individuals. And then I'm also doing a basic reconciliation, showing them how to do it and set it up in Excel. So it's a step. Getting your accounting degree and becoming a CPA is a stepping stone to a lot of opportunities.
Right. Thank you. I think that we're really fortunate to have had this opportunity to tell you all a little bit more about nonprofit accounting. I think that in my days in high school and college, I just didn't know enough about it, and I kind of discounted it as a career path. And since I've come full circle and worked in nonprofits and audited nonprofits, it's really a great place to be. So I really encourage you to take this information back to your students and educate them on what opportunities are out there and the challenges. I mean, we heard a lot of challenges here, and there's huge opportunity to learn a lot in your position and really feel great about what you're doing. So just in case any students then get super excited and want to jump right in, do any of your entities offer internships, and what would you look for in an intern?
So I'll speak a little bit to that. I don't currently have an internship program, but it's something I'm talking with my director about because I think it would be great. The staff that I'm hiring, I'm training them up. Some of them have financial backgrounds and accounting degrees. Some are working towards that. Some have just recently graduated. And investing some time and resources into our staff, get them to like your organization and show them the opportunities within your organization. I think even if they move around, the entity itself is still gaining. What would I tell them? I think my key line is dress for the job you want, not necessarily the one you have. And even I think at any level that really applies. And again, going back to taking ownership of whatever work it is you are doing. I can say from the reconciliation piece of my work with general accounting, Excel skills are key. And students can teach themselves that with courses in high school, but they can also do lynda.com training or other one-day seminars. It's huge to be able to utilize that as a tool, or Access if they're really good at Excel. Once you learn about an accounting software, the principles are the same. So as a hiring manager, if somebody has used a different version of some software, I know they understand the concepts, I'll take that person on. And I know that I can teach them the concepts of our particular software. And I'm developing some training programs and starting some discussions and plan to network with my prior college to see if we can start this to kind of generate some interest, because it's a big need. There's a big void for accountants in a lot of different capacities. So if we can help get some more in our door, that helps me as a hiring manager, but also it helps our community.
We did have an intern last summer. Actually, Price, our treasurer is a partner at Price Waterhouse, and they have an internship program where they take inner city individuals that are in college that have an interest in accounting, and they provide them internships. So Price Waterhouse paid the intern, and they find opportunities where they can work. So we did have an intern last summer. Unfortunately, she decided that accounting was not for her. But at least she knows that now. If she hadn't done an internship, maybe she wouldn't have known that. So, she can focus her career path where she wants to go. I would say the best advice you can give your students is communication is key, whether it's written or verbal. You need to be able to communicate business accounting terms to maybe non-business people, especially, like at the art museum, I deal with a lot of curators who, they think with the other side of their brain. They don't necessarily understand accounting. So it's very challenging sometimes to get them to understand the debits and the credit side of the business. But they really need to in order for us to achieve a balanced budget, because they have a lot of the spending power for exhibitions and things. The other thing I would say is, no matter what job you have in accounting, you need to be able to think of yourself as providing a service. You're dealing with customers, whether they're internal or external. You need to help them understand what is going on, how to analyze the budget versus actual, what does it look like for the end of the year? Are you going to be spending more than what we budgeted or not? So all of those things, problem solving, I would say, is another critical skill for students to have.
Yeah, we also use students in our department and for work study programs and from our accounting programs. And one of the things I'll say is that dependability. You have to be able to be dependent on if you are going to be in a working environment. And just like Jane just said, the customer service aspect of it, you have to have that customer service mindset. And also the curiosity to learn. As an intern, you're there to learn. And so you have to be willing to ask questions, get out of your comfort zone, try new things. You really have to be able to be in an environment where you want to learn to be successful for an internship program.
Our current organization does not use interns. We're open to the idea of doing it. I've used interns in the past, and I'm looking for individuals who have enthusiasm, some of the soft skills where that you either have them or you don't. And the critical thinking, of course, if they've got their accounting degree or they've been working in accounting, they've got their education, they're going to know the technical skills. I think it's important to also help them by opening doors for them. So maybe they don't want to be in the accounting office. Maybe finance is where they want to be. Maybe investments is where they want to be. So when I've used interns in the past, I've introduced them to people. So I have a wealth of contacts within my network, and I've assisted them with finding where they really do want to be. So again, I look on getting that accounting degree as a very strong foundation for everything else that they may want to do.
I agree. Well, that's all the time we have for our panel. I want to thank all of our panelists today. And if you do have any further questions, many of us are sticking around for the speed networking and for lunch. So hopefully you can get all your questions answered then. So let's thank our panelists.